Today is September 22nd, 2025. I am interviewing Eugane Shavensky at the Butler VA in Butler, Pennsylvania. Mr. Shavensky is 97 years of age and was born on August 1928. I am Chuck Jennings, the interviewer. I am being assisted by George Richardson, the videographer. Mr. Shavensky, what service were you in?
Well, at that time it was U.S. Army.
And
U.S. Army Air Force. Yeah.
So,
and then after I was up there, they separated.
yep. So, what was the highest rank you achieved?
What's that?
Highest rank you achieved. What was your rank?
Right, sergeant, 3 stripes. That was the highest.
And where did you serve at?
In Alaska.
Okay.
And
Well,
then
well, before we get started in your military experience, let's start at high school. Where'd you grow up at?
in Gilpin Township, which is a suburb of Leechburg, Pennsylvania.
Now, you went to school in Leechburg?
I went to school in Gilpin Township first, then I went to high school in Leechburg, which was like I say, Gilpin Township was a subset of Leechburg.
Now, when you were in high school, did you play any sports or baseball or?
You read that little note there. I played football in high school. In grade school, I played baseball.
So, when you were playing football, did your team win any trophies or anything?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So, once you completed that, your high school, what did you do then? What was going on at that time?
I went into the service.
Yeah, and you chose the Army Air Corps, right?
Yeah.
Why did you choose the Army Air Corps?
Well, the story, our county seat was Kittanning, and there, the post office building was all the recording places in the basement. My mother drove me over there, and I was going to the Navy. We get in there, the Navy office was closed. She said, well, we'll go home and we'll bring you back. I said, no, Mom, let's go down the hallway. Walk down the highway, U.S. Army. I said, I'm going to enlist there. She had to sign for me because I was
17.
3 days short of my birthday.
And that you were 17, 3 days short, right?
She signed me up, but she left me there because they had a group that was already staying at the YMCA in Kittanning. And
So,
they were waiting for transportation to go down to Fort Belvoir, Virginia.
now, did you have to wait an extra day before you went up? You stay at the YMCA?
She signed me in. I was in the service.
You were going. You were off to Fort Belvoir.
I had to live civilian clothes on the day I signed up, and even when I went to Fort Belvoir, I spent 3 days in those dirty clothes peeling potatoes and onions. In a dump truck. It was up here. There's 3 of us down here peeling potatoes for 3 days. Okay, then from there is whenever we got assigned a place in Fort Belvoir. That's when we got our uniforms, okay? From there, then they shipped me down to, we went from Fort Belvoir, we went out to, for basic training at, I have to get this straight, I'm not sure. I think we said we had to stop someplace. We were on a trooper train.
Troop train.
Someplace along the line we had to stop and get out and spend some time, but I don't know where that was. But I ended up in Texas, okay? And that's where I took my basic training, okay? And that's when everything took place, okay? And
Well,
then,
Tell me about your basic training. When you first got checked into your barracks and you had to find your bunk and you had to put yourself in the locker all neat and tidy. So tell me about that kind of stuff.
well, that's when you made friends. I mean, just the guy. The thing is, the story I tell. I was a country boy, okay. I mean, I wasn't exposed to the outside, but my bunk buddy was from Baltimore, Maryland. Okay, so on the weekends we got a pass to go into town to the movies. Okay, well, I went by myself. Okay, I went in, sat down in the movies, and there wasn't that many people in it. In fact, where I sat, that whole row was empty. Just about the time the movie started, this guy come in and he sat down beside me. The movie started. He puts his hand over on. Okay, hey, what the hell's going on? I got up, moved out of it. Okay, I moved maybe 3 rows down and that far over. He followed me. Okay, so I got up and got out of the theater and I told what happened. He gave me my money back. So when I got back to bunk, my buddy from Baltimore, I said, you know what happened to me? He says, how dumb are you? You know what he was? I said, no, what? He was a queer. I said, what's a queer? Hey, that's how dumb I was, a country boy. I was never exposed to something like that. He says, he was a homosexual. You know what that is? I said, yeah. Well, he was trying to put the make on you. And from that day on, his name was Kilgore, he kept me informed about life. He told me, he says, you and I we're going down to town, okay? And in there, there's a canal runs through part of that Texas that we were in.
Nice walk.
So we go there in that boat and we floated around, and not only he and I, but there was about maybe 4 others, 5 others, I don't know how many. So we found out where we could go to get something to eat and something to drink, beer. That's all we ever drank was beer. So we ended up in this restaurant, and there was music, and there was women, okay? And all kind of activity going on. And we sat down to eat, and so my buddies, they approached a couple girls there and start dancing with them. Next thing you know, we're in a brawl. These guys that didn't like the idea that soldiers were dancing with their girls. All right? I wasn't involved, but they were in there fighting. So I got up to go over and help. I still have the scar. The guy was fighting with a bottle. Cut my finger. And I decked him,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest of, by that time, we have MPs coming in. They settled everything. We got out of it. So that was my experience in there. But we did a lot of sightseeing with these guys and with my buddy.
Mm-hmm.
He kept me informed.
wing.
He said, we walked down the street. He said, "Don't go in there. Don't do this. Don't do that. Let's go there. Let's go. We'll go over here to eat." So that was my experience with probably life.
Yeah, that was a real awakening for you.
Right.
Through boot camp.
Right.
So
From there on, I transferred from. I took basic training there, and that's where I became an expert with the 30 caliber carbine. Out of the whole gang of taking, I hit this bullseye 3 times. At home I had a 22, and me and my dad trapped for muskrats and any other wild animals, and the local hardware store would take. We would trim them down and
yeah,
take
sell the
them.
pelts.
We'd sell the hide to the hardware store. And that was my experience with a gun at home. Okay? In fact, I just gave that 22 rifle a couple years ago to my son. And I also gave him a pistol that I had. I said, I'll never use it. So, and I ended up in Colorado. And that's where I took, I got out of the weapons repairman because they didn't have nobody there. Everything was transferred. So my retraining of
Become a typist.
Yeah, and then I got into operations, and that's where I met my father, ex-father, Captain King.
So, what school did you go to learn typing? Where was that at? Do you recall?
Yeah, the only thing I can tell you, it was in Colorado, Denver. I don't know what.
What airport?
I couldn't tell you what the name of it was. But then too, there was a space of time from Texas to Texas, or to Colorado, that I cannot answer for.
Oh, I was going to ask you, did you get a chance to come home after you finished boot camp? You got a chance to come home, I would think.
I came home after I finished my basic training in Texas. And then in that letter there, it says, the headline on it, I was home and I got interviewed by the high school secretary. And I told him that when I go back, I said, I may end up in Alaska. That was hearsay. I said, I'm not sure. Well, I got back to Colorado. From Colorado, ended up in California for a short period of time. But all in between that, I was receiving all kind of training for weapons repairmen. Okay, this all happened there. Now I go from there, I go out to Seattle, Washington. I spent a couple of days there. Then we shipped up went to California, and that's where the troop ship was.
Well, before we go on to that, before we get up to Seattle, when you came home, did your mom make anything special for you? Or nothing?
No, my neighbor across the street was a disabled Navy man, and he used to always kid me. He says, "Hey, Sarge," I was still a private. He says, "Hey, Sarge, how you doing?" And the only clothes I had was what Mom, so I would change right away. But occasionally, when I went up to the high school, I went in my uniform.
Yeah.
But it was just it was like a vacation. I was home. I think it was somewhere around a week maybe a little bit over a week.
Yeah, usually it's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, did you took a train over to the West Coast then?
No.
You took a
Train.
train? So,
I went from my house to let's see, Colorado. I'm confused there. I don't know.
well, that's fine. Well, I was kind of curious. That was your first train ride, or going down to boot camp was your first train ride?
Oh no,
No?
because we traveled on a train whenever I enlisted in Kittanning. We had to go down to Fort Belvoir in a train, and then from there to Texas we went in a train. So most of my traveling time was by train. And then, like I said, when I got to California, Seattle was on a troop ship. All that travel was by plane, not plane, by train. And then we stayed in the port for 3 days, and I was seasick for 3 days. And this sergeant that was in charge of our group, he come up. I'm doing it. In fact, I didn't eat, and then he says, "It's your turn to go down the galley and do KP." I said, "I'll never make it." I said, as soon as I got to the top of the galley, down, dry heaves and everything. I can remember that very much. And then I'm out on the deck one time, and this sergeant come up to me, and he said, "Here, try this here, Seagram 7." He said, He said, "That'll cure you." I said, "No, I don't drink liquor." I said, I drink beer." He said, "No, take a drink of this. This will soothe your stomach." Well, he was a sergeant, and hey, I'm a private. So I took out of the bottle, just swallowed it. No word down, it was out, and it was all over me because of the wind. That was the end of my liquor. I didn't drink alcohol for I don't know how long.
Yeah, once that happens one time, you don't want to have more of it for a while.
That's all I ever, even at home, the only time I drank wine was with my grandparents, my Italian grandparents, because I used to help him make wine. I'd stomp the grapes in the barrel, and that was my part. And off the same line, that became a novelty at school, because a lot of the other guys did the same thing. We'd get to school on Monday, and the boys, you say, "Look at my legs." It was a competition.
Yeah, all red.
Oh yeah, mine too. I was sort of reddish brown from my knees down, but that only lasted 3-4 days.
Yeah.
I got it washed off. So, but anyhow, we're on the boat, and we end up in the port up in Alaska.
No one offered you crackers or anything to eat?
In fact, I didn't eat the whole trip up. All I ate, maybe water, and that was the only thing that appealed to me. I might have had something that I don't remember. And when we got to Seward, again, it was a train trip from there to Fairbanks, and that's where Ladd Field was. That's where I was assigned.
So, you got off the train, you grabbed your duffel bag. They had a truck there or a car there to pick you up?
They had a bus that transported us from there. Well, first of all, from the port, it was a train, to Fairbanks. Then from Fairbanks, we got on a bus, which was a short distance to the airport. And that's where all of our housing was too. We lived in Quonset huts.
So, once you got in, did you have lockers or did you have to use a foot locker?
A foot locker.
Foot locker? You didn't have lockers per se?
Yeah.
So, once you got your foot locker squared away, how did they say that, oh, you're going this way, you're going this way? How'd that come about?
Well, you had, first of all, you had a what do you call the office on it? What do they call that?
Well, just basically you went in the office and they told you pretty much where to go.
Some kind of, I can't think of the name. Where are all the
Logistics? It's fine, but you went to an office to get where you were gonna go and information.
Yeah, what do they call that place? That office?
It doesn't come to me right away. I'm like you.
Some kind of room.
Yes.
No. Well, anyhow, so that's where all the business took place. In other words, they took you to, here's the Quonset hut you're going to stay in. Okay. There was enough room in there for 12 people. In the middle of it was a gas furnace. Okay. And then you had to go from our bunk. We had to go probably, I'm going to say, I'm guessing about 25 yards to the latrine. And at the temperature, I mean, you had to run, and you better hold it, because, you know, you go that far, you're either going to poop your pants or wet your pants. And that became, so the coldest I had there was 70 below zero.
That's cold.
Yeah, that was in the wintertime.
Now, did you have to run a fire watch in your Quonset hut because there was a dripple that fuel fell into the cooking thing to make the warm brew, or what? A lot of guys that I've talked to, they had a drip line coming to that furnace to heat the place, and you had to have a fire watch all the time. No.
The only thing that was that furnace, and there was one guy in the whole area. I mean, now understand, this isn't a so-called a complete
Quonset hut.
yeah.
It's a half or a quarter.
In other words, there was probably, I think we had 6 of those, okay?
Oh, okay.
Quonset. So at the most, there was probably 12 to 15 guys in one of those, all right? And then we had also a crew of 3 Eskimos that were in charge of our dog sleds, okay? They were part of our unit is attached to us for air rescue. In other words, there was a separate section outside of where we lived that was nothing but air rescue. And there was again a master sergeant with a dog, a trained dog, and it was his job to, you know, if anything happened up in that area, get on the plane with that dog and with the equipment, and he would bail out with the dog and all the equipment to so-called crash.
Yep.
Or not necessarily crash. Sometimes they the soldiers were being trained with the Eskimos, and they might get stranded someplace out there. So that, I mean, he would have to fly up in a C-47, bail out with the dog and whatever emergency equipment had. So that was part of our A3 operations. But again, where we lived, every morning you got on a bus, took you out to the airport where my officers were, where I answered to, my job. And there was a master sergeant, and there was me, and there was 2 female secretary, and my Captain King. On occasion, there was a second lieutenant came and was being tutored by him for some of the, off
Yeah.
jobs that he couldn't. But then the commanding general also had his office down the hall like this here. That's where he had his so-called crew. It was a general. I don't know what, but I have pictures of him in my books at home. And like I say, anything that happened in Alaska came through that headquarters up front. Then there was, if it had to do with the intelligence office was next door to us. If it had something to do with medical, there was a medical office. There, here's our office, and here's this, just like a garden. And then, like I say, the female secretary, she did all the paperwork. Then the sergeant, my sergeant, he started teaching me to type. So I'd be able to type, and then, some things that came in that had to go to your office, I had to make sure that it was typed. And then he would get assigned by the captain, and then somebody else would come and handle this to the outline. But the airport was right out. Here's our office. Here's the airport. We could see planes coming and going. And all those fighter pilots, small planes. There was one organization that was mostly ours coming up. It was called the Hat and Ring. That was their nickname. In fact, on their fighter plane, they had the hat and the ring, and then too, like I say, we had to provide. Where are you going to go? Well, when you get out of the airplane, you go here to the waiting room. There'll be a bus take you to a living area. No, it wasn't our area. They had a different place, and they had a different place to eat. It was also my job. Once a month, I had to serve KP. And I look forward to that because you get over there, it was a weekend. I'd get over there, get there early in the morning. The cook would say, "All right, guys, what do you want?" I'll take 2 eggs or something. He said, "I got steak." Hey, maybe half a dozen of us would sit down eating steak before the rest of the people come. Then you figure we had breakfast, and it was a whole, it was a cycle. In other words, my 4 or 5 Quonset huts, they come in, they were supposed to be there at 7 o'clock. Okay? They'd get up, the next crew would come in maybe 9, 10 o'clock. And they were from that fighter group. They would come. And then after that, there'd be the maintenance people along with the Eskimos. And they lived in a separate area, but within walking distance
Mhm.
of our. So that was, I enjoyed my life. In fact, when it came time for my discharge, I was ready to sign re-enlist. That's another story.
We'll get to that story before long. So, when you had mentioned that you helped the captain with a number of things like babysitting and going across to Canada. So can you go into some of those stories? Some of the stories about you babysitting the captain's kids?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, tell us about that.
Well, hey, like I say, he really, it was his, I didn't go to him and cry about anything. He came to me and told me, this is what we're gonna do. You know, it was personal. He said, you know what, you're due for a stripe. He said, next week you're gonna get your stripe. So I got one stripe.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, hey, get that, like I said, he said, get the pass, we're going fishing. Get a pass, we're going to Canada. Get a pass, we're going to the Sioux. We're going to the zoo. We're going wherever we were going. It was his, always his. I never went. And I also got, in my childhood, I was an altar boy, a Catholic. And I lived 2 houses from the church. So I became a very good friend of the priest. Okay? And any time there was anything special, my mother would get a note from him, hey, Father Ken wants you for a funeral. Father Ken wants you for a wedding. Father Ken, he wants that. So I was with, hey, I would, even with him, he had relatives, a brother up in Canada that was a priest. He says, when are you out of school? I said, well, I think our school ends such and such. He said, tell your mom I'm going to take you up to Canada for a week. So, okay, so that sort of, clinched me with him. He was a good friend and so forth. And any problem I might have, which was rare, but anything I had questions about, I would present it to him. He'd tell me, do this, do this. So now we're up in Canada with his brother. Okay? I drove the car home. I drove his car home. Now that connection boiled over into Alaska, because I became an altar boy in the church up there. Whenever I was free on a weekend, I was at church as an altar boy. Okay? But the chaplain, he served 3 masses on Sunday. One was Catholic, one was Presbyterian, one was Jewish. So I didn't stay for the other. I stayed for the Catholic. When I went to re-enlist, that's where it ended up. Somehow, when I communicated to my mother and dad that I was going to re-enlist, this was maybe 2 months before it came due. She mentioned it to my priest in my hometown. He got in touch with the chaplain in Alaska. The chaplain called, hey, I got a letter from your priest in home. He says, your mother don't want you to re-enlist. They need you at home. That was the end of my enlistment. I would have I would have made that a career because I had it.
You had it made. Now,
I had-
you had said that you went with the captain fishing. He'd say, well, we're going fishing today. You went out and went fishing.
but I always had to get a pass
Right.
on
Yeah.
a week. I couldn't go during the week,
No.
but I did this one time that I asked for a favor. We were building bombing targets out of wood, out of trees. Trees were about to. In other words, that request came through and I mentioned to the sergeant in charge of our office. I said, I'm going to ask Captain King if I can go out and be in the field with those guys. I went and asked him. He said, sure. He said, it'd be real good. He said, I'll get the paperwork for you. So get the paperwork and goes over to the office that controls our activities. And then this again, a sergeant was in charge of that office where the payroll and everything went through. So he says, boy, you really got some pull, don't you? He said, look, I work for the guy, but he offered it to me, and I says, I'm taking it. So I ended up about 2 weeks out now this is in the winter time, and it's in the boonies.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing around for 300-400 miles. The only thing that was near there was a makeshift housing out of those tents, those what, 6 men or 10,
Mm-hmm.
10 men, 10. That there, plus a eating cafeteria type mess hall. That's the only thing that was up there, and we always transported from here to that building site. We had a crew that was cutting down these trees about this big around, had another crew that was dragging them over to target site, and then 3 or 4 guys shifting those around by hand. There was no backhoe, no out there. It was out in the bonies, okay? So we laid this one, and it like this here. This is what it ended up as a pyramid,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So you started off with one maybe a little bit bigger in this room. That would be took 3 or 4. Then you gradually, kept
going up.
And then the logs got smaller, but then you had to
Keep on building.
yeah.
Now, you said you went over with the captain to buy food, and for all the officers. Can you go into that story?
Yeah, with him.
Yeah, that's what you had said. You went over to buy food with the captain.
Well, like I say, this was an agreement with. I had nothing to do with it. This was an agreement between the officers that lived on base. Okay, so that your Captain Jones, your Captain Smith, not all of them turned in a slip every time, but then too, it was your turn now. It was your turn. Now it was Captain King's turn. So whenever it was his turn, he always offered me the trip. Always. And then too, he had this list, and the connection in Canada was a so-called, I'm going to say, an American soldiers or captain or whoever took care of that. When we landed in that airport, it was U.S. government controlled that airport. So we give the list to that whoever. I didn't do it. I was a passenger. he'd give the list to this guy, whoever, he was a military man. It would take him probably, we get there on a Friday, and by Sunday, he'd have everything, individual boxes, yours. So all we had to do was make sure it got on the plane, okay? Fly back home. We landed in Ladd Field in Fairbanks. Somebody over there with their truck took it over to the officers, recreation area or wherever, and unloaded it, and it was up to them. And each one of those boxes had a name on it. And that was the end of it.
Now, I know you went fishing. I have a picture here of you with a big old salmon. But did you ever go hunting up there or in Alaska? Did you ever go hunting with?
No, he was a hunter, but I never went hunting.
Okay.
No, it's just that, I don't think, I don't know for sure, but I never asked for where would I get a rifle to go hunting for moose or whatever. But he would occasionally, not on a, he would go because he was invited with a group, and they'd fly out to that reservoir, which was about 300 more miles north, and up there was the Russian border. Okay, that's where we had I'm going to say a makeshift landing field in a scarce or downsized crew, to take care of anything up there. They had what's that small airplane?
C-47?
No, small, two-place.
Beaver? Or Beaver? There were all kinds of.
It's real small.
Cessna?
Cub Cadet.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
What?
Something like that. That's what they had up there. That's all. They could fly that 300 miles. If they had to. But it was a sparse crew up there to take care of it. And like I say, I really enjoyed mine because I wasn't bored. I mean, and then too, one of my buddies introduced me to hockey. He was born and raised in Canada, but he joined American soldier. And Jim Brown, Jim Martin. He got together a crew and taught them how to play hockey. And he'd take me along. It was a afternoon or evening out in a lighted ring, open.
Did you skate before you went up there?
Huh?
Did you play hockey down here?
No,
It was all brand new to you.
All brand new. In fact, I never heard of hockey till I got up there. Like I say, I was a farm boy. I mean, I lived in a coal mine here, a steel mill over here, and the rest was all farm. I worked on the farm in the summertime when I was in school, planting pickles and pumpkins, harvest pumpkins and pick pickles by hand. Now they don't do that.
No.
We picked them by hand when I was in school.
So, is there anything else you can think of? I know a B-52 came in one time and you had some problems with it. That aircraft with the motors?
The what?
Aircraft with the motors. You had mentioned that before.
I all I was involved with was to more or less to coordinate this airplane. There was a lot of paperwork with that big bomber, you know. There was 4 engines, and you know they had to take care of it too, even though it's sitting on the ground. And the guys that came with it, they had to be, you know, provided for, and they didn't do nothing but entertainment and make sure, you know, if there anything they had to do with the airplane, or you know, keep it in shape, what little bit there is. But it took about 3 weeks, 4 weeks before those motors would come back.
Yeah, you had said that the motors wouldn't start because of the cold weather.
Right.
They had to do some modification to them.
They had, I guess, I don't know the details, but you know, it either had to do with the lubrication, and then too, you know, the oil is 70 below zero, you know.
It was just
Yeah, and then too, you know, at that time these fighter pilots come from Texas, they are already were into that, you know. Their planes, as soon as their planes come up, they were checked and make sure that whatever was adapted to Alaska, it was there, you know. They had a check-off list that come with the airplane. So it's just a matter of not us, but the crew chiefs and the people on the flight line. It was up to them to make sure all of that. We had nothing to do with it. All we had to do was make sure that plane landed here, and this is where you're going to live. This is what you're going to do. Da da da. You're going to go out here and survive. But before you go out there, they had to make sure they got classroom and clothes and anything that was necessary for you to go out. I went out a couple of times, but I had the clothes. That's another story. When I got my discharge up in Great Falls, Montana, I had a choice. I could take my 30 caliber carbine, a sleeping bag, and park it. I took the clothes and I left the gun there, which was, now I look back at that, I should have kept that gun too.
Yeah.
Because that gun, it was a real good gun, because every once in a while, I'm going to say, I don't know how often, we had to go out to the shooting range and get three shots. That was it. You're done. But before you did that, you know, you went through all the paperwork and you had a sample of that gun you're going to use. It was all a part. You could have it, put it back together. If it didn't work, you had to take it apart. And so, but my daughter, oldest one, I think Roseanne still has the sleeping bag, and I know her husband had the parka. I didn't keep the parka. Oh, I kept the Mickey Mouse boots.
The old white boots. They were warm.
That's right. I kept those too. But it was a choice. You know, when I got to Great Falls, Montana, you have a choice. Okay, you want all three, fine. You went to boots, fine. I could have had the whole shebang. But to get from Great Falls, Montana, to my home, it took me 3 days. Because I got on the airplane here, I had to fly to Texas. I had a layover in Texas. And then from Texas, I had to fly to, I don't know, Oklahoma or someplace. I don't remember. had a layover there. Then when I got to Pittsburgh, I couldn't get a bus from Pittsburgh to my home. I had to stay there overnight till the bus came in the morning.
So once you got out of the service, how'd you meet your wife, or what happened? Did you find a job right away, or what happened?
I got to be a pain in the ass to my parents. I was coming home at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning when they're going to work. You know, they didn't put up with that. Okay.
Were you out drinking beer, or what?
Well, at that time it was my two cousins. They were out of the service ready, and they took hold of me, and we went to all these hokey poke places to meet girls, and there was always a lot of booze. Okay, so my priest there, he got hold of me and he says, you know, your mom and dad are a little bit mad at you for your life, because I didn't do nothing. I went out to the farm and pick pickles and do anything that I could find out there, and then on the off days or on a weekend it was always.
Mm-hmm.
So he told me, he says, you better talk to somebody and get your feet on the ground. Well, I had to go to a doctor for I don't know, some kind of whatever it was. I had to go, and it seems like this is what happened. My dad got in touch with the doctor and asked him to talk. When my boy comes in to see you, talk to him about getting some kind of job. Well, this doctor talked, say, what are you going to do with your life? I says, I don't know, I haven't made up my mind. He says, let me get one of my technicians and have her talk to you. So this lady, her Betty, what was Betty's last name? She was chief technician, lab technician. And she says, you think you'd like to be a technician? Drawing blood and that? Says, well, I never did it before. So she took me, she says, meet me at the hospital on Saturday. This was in the office. She said, meet me at the hospital on Saturday. I'll take you in there and show you what goes on. Well, went through the laboratory and this and that, and she says, how about x-ray? Took me over to x-ray and they showed me, you know, the most exposure I was to x-ray or lab was, you know, routine lab in the military or mm-hmm. I had to have a chest x-ray or something like that. That was nothing. Well, so she told me about this school in Philadelphia. She said it's a 2-year course. You can take laboratory or x-ray, or you can take both. I signed up. Military paid for everything. My education, my housing. The only thing I had to pay housing was at $30 for the apartment I lived in. And the rest was picked up by the military. So I took lab and x-ray, and that's where I met my wife. Okay?
In Philadelphia?
And she's from Puerto Rico. And she came up from well, she was working up in someplace up in the northern part of Pennsylvania, something. She worked in a psycho hospital. Well, whenever that, she ended up with she took the laboratory course, or laboratory, and along with, she was, that's when we met. Then we started dating there, and her course finished in 9 months, and she went back home, and she worked in Puerto Rico in the hospital down there, and we kept communicating. And after my course was 2 years, I got a job out in Illinois, doing both, lab and x-ray in a small hospital, DeKalb, Illinois. And kept communicating to her. And boiled down to we're want to get married. So we had, her relatives lived in Brooklyn. So that's where she come up there, and that's where I met her family up there. Well, and the family up there made all kind of arrangements for the wedding up there. So we got married in Brooklyn. And her mother was sent up from Puerto Rico, but her father was an official in the government, so he couldn't. So I never met him then. But we got married there and ended up back out in DeKalb, and she got a job in one of the small hospitals doing lab work. And I continued my job doing the two, x-rays and lab. It was a 30-bed hospital. Well, communicating to the people in New York, the one daughter they had there, and said that there's a Presbyterian hospital here that you could maybe come out here and get a job there. That's what it ended up. I went out there and I got a job at the Presbyterian hospital, and she got a job downtown New York in the theater business, where they rented out the movie to the different theaters. And that's where it kept on going back and forth.
So somewhere you had a daughter, then another daughter?
My other daughter?
Yeah, you had two daughters. Do you have a son or just two daughters?
This one here, Angie, and my Roseanne was the older one. What was she doing? She was she went to that college in Pittsburgh.
Culinary. I thought it was a community college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She ended up in a dietary,
Dietary.
I don't know. I don't think the first one job wasn't a hospital. Was a motel. We had a restaurant. I think that's in Pittsburgh, and I think that's where she started out her job. And after that, she ended up in the medical, hospital. And then she ended up in this here private school in Pittsburgh.
Now, did you have any grandkids or great-grandkids?
Yeah.
How many?
She had 2 boys, okay?
2?
2 boys.
Okay.
And my son his marriage didn't last, and he went to air traffic controller in the tower, and he lived at home, and he worked in the Pittsburgh airport, and he ended up being a chief in Pittsburgh, and then somehow he got into a complex air traffic program where he would go to the different airports and sort of supervise and make recommendations. Well, you got too many people there. Oh, you need 2 more people. Or you need, this guy doesn't do it, duty. This, he made the recommendation, then he move off to, so he traveled all of the East Coast, New York, Maine, Baltimore, and all over there, Illinois. So he got to be a supervisor, and that's what he ended up with.
So how many grandkids do you have?
Well, her 2, and my oldest daughter 2.
Okay, now great-grandkids?
No. Yeah,
3.
right. You got 3. And
3
Roseanne has 3 grandkids, so they're your great-grandkids.
yeah.
Andrew, Aiden, and Alex.
Yeah. So but they don't, like hers,
Mine are too young yet.
they
Or they don't
moved
care.
down to Florida. Where Roseanne, where did they live?
In Oklahoma,
Oklahoma.
Edmonton, Oklahoma.
Well, at this point, I would like to thank you for your service to the nation. Thank you very much. And I wish you all the best. And I talked to you about, when you get close to 100, about coming in and doing that. So, thank you.